Funding for this edition of State of Affairs with Steve Adubato has been provided by United Airlines, connecting people, uniting the world. Fedway Associates, Inc. The Russell Berry Foundation, making a difference. MD Advantage Insurance Company. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. The Northward Center. The Adler Aphasia Center, enriching the lives of people with aphasia, their families, and communities. Johnson & Johnson. And by Caldwell University. Promotional support provided by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. And by AM 970 The Answer.
Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. We are taping on the 17th of November. You'll see that information up on the screen. But we are joined right now by Dr. Jessie Wilt, Department Chair of Pulmonology, Critical Care, and Sleep Medicine at Summit Medical Group. Good to see you, Doctor.
Good to see you, Steve.
By the way, we're just making clear the reason Dr. Wilt's holding that microphone is to make sure our audio is good. But way more important than our audio right now, as we tape this program, the twindemic, flu season, COVID, going into 2021. What should most people or all of us be looking for and concerned about?
So thankfully, most of the community here in New Jersey and around the country has prepared themselves for this season ahead. The steps we're taking to control COVID are one and the same with the steps we need to do to control flu. Keep that face covered, keep those hands clean, and maintain social distance. These two viruses are spread by very similar mechanisms: respiratory droplets, high concentration in the nasal passages. So that's why you hear people really making sure to tell patients and people around the state, get that mask up over your nose. This is where the virus spreads. In the event that you come into contact with a person or a surface that could be contaminated with either of these viruses, focusing on your hand hygiene, keeping the hands clean, sanitized, and away from the face are all the steps we need to take that are going to be the most effective steps, in addition to what most of New Jerseyans have pursued, is getting their flu shots.
Do me a favor, pull that microphone a little closer as we keep talking, Dr. Well, let me ask you this. We were joking that our kids at Seton Hall Prep, your son a senior, my son a junior, but you talked about how to wear the mask. At what point are we going to get to the point where virtually all Americans see the mask, not as a political statement, but as a sign, not just of protecting oneself, but as out of respect to others? No?
We'll get there. As this virus, unfortunately, we were the epicenter in March and April. The rest of the country didn't see or feel what we felt here in New Jersey. We learned an early lesson. Unfortunately, rates have increased and bloomed across the country, not sparing any state, as most Americans encounter either first or second hand, a dear friend, a loved one, suffering from the ravages of this condition. That's going to be high motivation to continue to pursue a mask as a self-protection mechanism. We haven't had riots over children wearing bike helmets or us wearing seatbelts.
Well said.
People will get there.
Let's talk protecting ourselves in terms of our mental health, our emotional and mental health. Exercise, critically important, correct?
Yes, absolutely. We talk about the 5 elements of self-wellness that are beyond your pharmacy, beyond your prescriptions. And we talk about sleep, hydration, nutrition, fitness, and mental wellness. People can sleep too much, laying around in bed, becoming lackadaisical. And as the weather turns colder, I mean, you saw it, I saw it. The streets were full of people, dogs, children, bikes, but we're heading into winter. We need to keep up that conditioning. We need to keep up that walking, and we need to support it with healthful nutrition. A lot of people, unfortunately, dug into some deep bad habits, either with sugars or alcohols. We need to stay away from that. Alcohol itself actually erodes your sleep quality.
Real quick, about a minute left or so. Any over-the-counter medicines that you advocate that will help us with our immune systems?
So there are a lot of trials out there, but one of the best is a supplemental vitamin C up to 1,000 milligrams twice a day is a healthy.
Took mine this morning with echinacea. Am I doing the right thing?
Doing the right thing. We don't want to hyperdose above those doses. We can get a lot of irritation from the acid in the vitamin C of the lining of the stomach. So yeah, that's one of the safest in addition to your nutrition and hydration.
Real quick, gyms, who the heck knows as people watch this open, close, we don't know. Best ways to exercise in your home, even if it's a small space.
Yes. So if you go to any of the online platforms where individual artists, there are an enormous amount of fitness professionals that have put free content to video through platforms such as YouTube and others that literally are called the no equipment home workout. They're going to run you through a 20 or 30-minute series of exercises that are going to preserve heart rate, strength, core strength, flexibility, agility, all the things we need to do to keep living well through this time.
Hey, Dr. Wilt, in 5.5 minutes, you gave more valuable information than some folks can find in a lot of other media outlets, let's say. I want to thank Dr. Jessie Wilt, Department Chair, Pulmonology, Critical Care, and Sleep Medicine at Summit Medical Group. Dr. Witt, best to you and your family and your colleagues. All the best.
Thank you, Steve. You too.
I'm Steve Adubato. We'll be right back.
To watch more State of Affairs with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
We're now joined by one of my favorite bankers, favorite people. Lucia DiNapoli Gibbons is the Metro New York, New Jersey Division Executive of Commercial Banking at Wells Fargo. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too, Steve.
It
the
has
highlight
been
of my
way too
day.
long, but let's do this. You're functioning, you're working, you're getting things done. But my question is this: you and I have talked about leadership for a couple of decades. How challenging is it leading in the banking world these days?
We could change that question to how challenging is it to lead in this COVID environment? You know, Steve, I've read all your books and I've followed all your advice over the years. And, you know, it's about staying connected to people, right? And doing it in different ways. One of the benefits I had was for the last 6 years, I was running a business up and down the East. And certainly I was traveling to see people, but more often than not, I was doing meetings via you know, some type of technology and via the phone. So I'm very, very comfortable with it. So it's about making connections with people more often than not, allowing some space for them to talk about, you know, how they're feeling and how everything that's happening is impacting them. You know me, I love leadership. So it's been great to exercise those skills to help people during this time.
But you also love connecting with people. And that's a big part of who you are and your success. So I'm also curious about this. Dramatically, since, say, let's say for Friday, March 13th, 2020, how has the banking industry changed?
It's interesting. So first, I would say we were making major investments in technology, platforms, and people pre-COVID. All of that is accelerated dramatically because consumers and businesses have really adopted all of those new tools out of necessity. So those investments are accelerating. So I'd say banks are becoming more like technology companies than anything else. The other interesting thing, Steve, is that despite a low to no interest rate environment, banks are awash in deposits right now because the savings rate for both consumers and businesses is up. People are stowing away the rainy day fund, right? Which is a really, really good thing. And then lastly, I would say now more than ever, our customers and prospects need us. They need our insight, our advice, our credit, tools and technology to help them get through this pandemic and hopefully to a much brighter future.
You know, let's do this. First of all, I want to say that Wells Fargo, one of the significant supporters of what we do, and have been supporting public broadcasting for a long time. But part of that and the commitment to the community goes to this Open for Business Fund. What is the Open for Business Fund and why should the average person care about it, Lucia?
I'm so excited that our company has done this. So the Open for Business Fund was created with the $400 million in fees collected through making PPP loans, right, which are helping businesses get through this pandemic. And right here in New Jersey, we have funded, I'm going to look down just for a second, it's the Greater Newark Enterprise Corporation for $250,000 and the Union County Economic Development Corporation for $500,000. We're supporting nonprofits that are supporting minority-owned businesses. So I'm excited that we've done that.
Why?
It matters. Listen, in order for our business to thrive, businesses and people have to thrive. And you know this, Steve, small businesses have been so hard hit by what's happened during the course of the past year. We have to do everything we can to make sure that businesses survive and get through, and that people survive and get through. Otherwise, what good is our business? We're only as good as the communities that we serve.
You know, along those lines, it's so interesting, Lucia. We've talked to many business leaders, small business, big business, medium-sized business, talk about their struggles, challenges. Philosophical but relevant question. How much do you believe the government is responsible for helping? You talked about what your bank is doing, other banks doing important things as well. Do you believe the government has an important role to help business during these very tough times?
I absolutely believe, I believe everyone has a role. Certainly government has a role. The Paycheck Protection Program
That's right.
was good for small business, and we played a huge role in that. There are companies, though, that are not going to survive, right? Infection rates are spiking again, and consumers and businesses need another injection of funds, some of them to help survive what's happening. So it would be great to see the government come together and decide on a second stimulus program. I will tell you that from an economic perspective, the forecast that we're making, don't assume that because it's so uncertain at this point.
Lucia, do not assume that? You do not assume that?
We do not assume that. It's too uncertain at this point. It's too uncertain at this point.
So, you know, 30 seconds left. You used the word uncertainty. What is the impact of the tremendous amount of uncertainty and having to make the business decisions that you and your colleagues have to make every day?
So I would say, I'm going to turn that around and say that businesses really stood in place for a while, given the great uncertainty. We have more certainty now, Steve. We're closer to a vaccine and therapeutics that we've ever been. And we are seeing certain customers that are doing well take advantage of opportunities by making acquisitions, buying real estate, you know, doing those kinds of things if they have the wherewithal to do it, because people are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But again, there's the have-nots that are not in that place, and they are ensuring that they have liquidity and working with us to ensure that liquidity so that they can get through the other side.
Well said. By the way, I remind folks as we talk to Lucia, we're taping on the 17th of November. It'll be seen the rest of this year into 2021. So the vaccine, right? That it's safe, that it's accessible, and people get it. Hey, Lucia, it's great seeing you. Next time we'll see each other in person, in a studio, God willing, and we'll talk that way. Thank you, Lucia.
I look forward to it, Steve. Thank you so much.
You got it. We're right back right after this.
To watch more State of Affairs with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
We're now joined by our good friend Steve Swetsky, Executive Director, New Jersey Education Association. Good to see you, Steve.
Good to be here, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
We're actually taping on November the 5th. There's a convention, the NJEA convention. It's virtual this year, going on a lot of years, over 100 years, but it's virtual. What's the biggest difference for you, Steve, virtual, in person, a convention?
Wow. So, I mean, just being able to be with people, talk to people, bump into them. This morning I did, we did our, opening, and we have a virtual Main Street, which you've been to the convention before. So, you know that we have a, an area where, members kind of join together for the organization. And so I took a walk down the virtual Main Street, and it was amazing. I bumped into rooms. There were members in there. They were conversing and engaging. And those weren't even the workshop rooms. The workshop rooms are all happening, on our virtual third and fourth floors of the center. These were just our places where our members gather. And so, while it's different, it's an opportunity, right? And one thing we're seeing lots of members participating in our events, not just convention, but throughout the year now, who really haven't had the opportunity before. Being able to access things and participate virtually is becoming second nature to everyone.
You know, Steve, last year when we were in Atlantic City for the convention, interviewed you and your colleagues, a big theme around racial justice, right? Racial and social justice. The themes this year of the convention is social justice, education justice equals student success. Give us a concrete example, Steve, of what we mean by social justice, education justice, or injustice. Put it out there.
Well, I think we're seeing that right now throughout New Jersey, as schools are in 600 different versions of instruction. Some with students in classrooms, some completely remote, some in hybrid models. And the virtual aspect of this is really exposing even more than we've talked about before, kind of the haves and the have-nots of who has access, who has the tools, right? Who has a place in their house to go to school. And so it's I think really exposing a whole new part of public education in ways that right now, everybody's pedaling really quick just to keep up and do what they need to do. When this all clears, I think we really should sit down for a conversation about how all of this connects and how public education is the connector.
Steve, here's my question, you know, whether it's State of Affairs or Think Tank or two public policy programs, I keep asking myself, from a public policy point of view, right? What do you believe, quote, education justice should look like? A, and B, are those policy decisions that have to be made? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think they are policy decisions that have to be made. And I think
Such as?
Well, I mean, you know, it's equity, it's funding, it's school facilities, it's, you know, all of these pieces that make schools that are not equitable throughout, you know, New Jersey. New Jersey is a segregated state, one of the most segregated states in the country. And so while we have the top ranked school system, you know, public school system in the country, if you dig a little deeper in there, you find, again, a lot of places where there are haves and there are have-nots. And those are the things that we should talk about. And it's got to be policy. I mean, that's where you bring everybody together on those policy issues.
But Steve, is that largely, by the way, let me disclose the NJEA, one of our longtime educational partners, an underwriter of what we do when it comes to educational programming. But I'm curious about this. How much of those policy decisions do you believe come out of the State House versus local boards of education and/or both?
I think it's both. And I think it comes down to resources, and it comes down to wealthier communities that have more resources than less wealthy communities. And so then you get the state involved in that conversation and the legislature involved in that conversation via funding, via the lawsuits that have gone on in New Jersey, you know, over a period of 30 years in terms of the Abbott decisions and the various versions of that, which are all designed to bring equity into the public education sphere and acknowledge where it doesn't exist and provide resources to, you know, to make things better in those areas.
By the way, let's be clear. I asked Steve about the State House, whether it's the legislature, the governor, combination of the two, the Department of Education. Steve just made reference to a school funding, ongoing issue about school funding from the state, which comes from the income tax in our state, largely in local property taxes. He made reference to the Abbott decision. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I'll just say this. He's making it clear that the Supreme Court in the state has a key role to play when it comes to seeking racial, social, and educational justice. Am I overstating that, Steve?
No, not at all. I mean, I think the Supreme Court has ruled in many cases over the years. And what the court typically does, though, is turn it back to the legislature, turn it back to the administration to implement
back and forth
pieces.
And back and forth. Yeah. Why is that, Steve?
I guess it comes down to resources. I guess it comes down to, you know, the amount of, you know, those, you know, funding resources that are available and how they're distributed and how that impacts everyone. And so it's not as simple. Yeah.
And the priorities, how high is priority is public education and our public school students is ultimately the question, it seems to me, no?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing again right now, you know, in all the preparations to return to school, right? Ventilation, right? Big issue. And there we find that even in our, you know, our more well-to-do districts, school buildings are just not constructed, right? To be,
that's right,
you know, kind of year round. They're not air conditioned in many cases. Then you turn to some of our more urban areas where schools in those places are, 100 or more years old. And now we talk about safe schools and how do we bring students into those, and staff, by the way, into those schools, in a safe way in the midst of a pandemic, the likes that we've never experienced before.
The issues that Steve Swetsky's raising, we will continue to examine from a policy perspective, from a human perspective, and most of all, in terms of teachers and students in that classroom or in a remote fashion. Hey, Steve, thanks so much for joining us from the convention remotely.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Steve.
We'll be right back.
To watch more State of Affairs with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
Back by popular demand, he's with us. He's Tom Weatherall, who is, in fact, president and CEO of Make-A-Wish New Jersey. Good to see you, Tom.
Great seeing you, Steve.
Describe Make-A-Wish in the age of COVID.
In the age of COVID, well, Steve, on one hand, our mission hasn't changed. We create life-changing wishes for children with critical illnesses. We're still doing what we've always done, what we've been doing for the last 37 years here in New Jersey, advancing our mission. So against some assumptions, perhaps, over the last several months that we've been curtailed, we haven't, Steve. We have still been granting wishes ever since this came to our shores, this COVID came to our shores and changed and turned all our lives here upside down in New Jersey and nationally and globally. Wishes have still been going on. How could they not, right? Steve, you know our mission as well as anybody, being such a dear friend to us for so long. We can't cancel hope. Kids are still being diagnosed with illnesses and life-changing medical conditions, despite the fact that COVID is here. And so our board, our staff, our donor base, all of our constituents, including past Wish families, especially as well, who have been through the experience, have all picked up, stepped up, and are helping us to count on and still grant wishes.
Tom, do this for us. A young boy named Nico, 15 years of age. If we were together in a studio and we had more time, we could talk more about it. But who's Nico? And describe this fascinating shopping spree.
I'd love to, Steve. What a special young man this guy is. So Nico, 15 years old, from Howell, New Jersey, down here in Monmouth County, battling Hodgkin's lymphoma. And when we turned to Nico and asked if you could have one wish, what would it be? His answer, he knew immediately. He wanted an online shopping spree. He wanted a PlayStation, a new Mac laptop, and a new iPhone. But he didn't stop there, Steve. He wanted to set aside some of the funds to pay it forward. He's being treated at Hackensack Meridian's wonderful Hovnanian Children's Hospital over in Neptune. And he's been in and out of the hospital over time. But he was so grateful to the care that he received there, that his family received there, that he wanted to pay it forward. And so with his shopping spree, he sent over a PlayStation. Well, actually, he delivered a PlayStation and a large screen TV for the hospital to set it up, to be installed in one of their lounges, so that other kids who were also hospitalized like him can experience something to break up the treatment protocols when they're there in the hospital, break up the monotony that occurs.
Sounds like an extraordinary young man.
He is. I was there. We held a press conference back a couple of months ago. I witnessed it. All of us who were there were moved by Nico. And, he recently underwent a relapse, though. And he's currently awaiting some more tests. He'll go for a PET scan in the next short time upcoming. They're hopeful that they'll receive some good news, but he'll be back in the hospital for a stem cell transplant later this month as well.
The entire public television family, our prayers, thoughts for Nico. Do this, Tom. Your website's been up throughout the entire segment. Tell folks how they can help Make-A-Wish right now.
Steve, right now, the best way to help us is by making a donation. NJ.wish.org go to our website. Thank you for showing it, Steve, and hit donate. Make a donation, whatever amount. All of those dollars are so important to us, so valuable, whatever the dollar size might be.
Tom, so we'll put this up there. The website will be out there. People should follow up. And Tom, as you told our producers, it's true. Hope is not canceled during COVID. Hey, Tom Weatherall, thank you, my friend. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for always lending us your platform to share our mission.
Anytime. That's Tom. I'm Steve. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by United Airlines, Fedway Associates, Inc., the Russell Berry Foundation, MD Advantage Insurance Company, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the Northward Center, the Adler Aphasia Center, Johnson & Johnson, and by Caldwell University. Promotional support provided by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association and by AM 970 The Answer.
Hi, I'm Governor Tom Kean. A dear friend of mine had aphasia, which is a language disorder that occurs from a brain injury or a stroke. It robs a person's ability to communicate, but it doesn't affect their intellect. Programs and services offered at the Adler Aphasia Center help to improve my friend's communication skills, as well as her self-confidence and quality of life. Most importantly, she was among people who understood her. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with aphasia, there is hope.